exploration into the housing market almost exclusively British Columbia and Vancouver. Fascinating. I lived in the area at the time up in Seattle in the 80s and 90s, so it was fascinating to hear what was going on while I was there. Um, but it's an incredible study of unfortunately the sort of the ineptitude and impotence of the Canadian government up until just very short time ago, 2016, when they started dealing with the problem. But it's also an interesting exploration of what happens to a completely unregulated housing market, especially when the government just steps back and doesn't build anything and just lets all the private investors do it. And what happened is organized crime comes in, money launderers from Asia came in, Hong Kong, China. These people not only built places but bought places, and then just kept them as for tax purposes. And some people even bought places and then worked in Hong Kong, and really incredible. And then you could see the shifting demographics and population when the government started getting involved again. It was very, very well done. Excellent, looking at all different, the real estate, the government, the lower levels, the higher levels. Really interesting. Well worth a look, and a definite warning. You see these things happening in the United States, but to see it so glaringly, just amazing. But looks like the Canadian government has finally started to step in and take care of
I
business.
thought
Well
this
done.
was an excellently crafted piece and really hit home for me, living in another expensive city. So, coming from the perspective of Toronto, it was really interesting to see the Vancouver perspective. And I thought this was really eye opening in terms of analyzing this bigger picture through concrete stats and drives, diverse set of expert points of views of how luxury real estate is driving out those low income earners, the elderly, young families just trying to start out and picture a future for themselves, and how this is essentially spiraling out of control. But instead of the clickbait articles and the newspaper headlines to incite hysteria or fear, I thought this was a great way of demystifying of how we've gotten here, and grounding this evolution. It was comprehensive and, yeah, not overly alarmist, as some docs can become that way. This just highlighted the deep concerns and aspects that Vancouver dwellers should be aware of with foreign investments, and yeah, really gave a wide variety of perspectives on how we've gotten to this point. I thought that visually there was really excellent shots encompassing the landscape of Vancouver, the beauty of the city, and the allure of it, why it is so in demand from foreign buyers and people all over. But how can we maintain attainability of cities and have a diverse population that can contribute to making a really well-rounded, vibrant, interesting city? So I think this is definitely a piece I'm going to be referencing in any debates or dinner party conversations, and I'm going to direct a lot of people towards this piece. So I'm grateful to have been able to view it.
I learned so much. It really did a deep dive into not just the Vancouver housing market and rental market, but also, all of the contributing factors around it, because it's not just a standalone issue, right? It's multiple things that create where we are today. And I thought it was really fascinating to hear from different experts on what's happening, what's happened, what is currently being done, but also from the people who it's directly impacting, which are the people who are at risk of being evicted from their homes by these private companies who are just looking, exclusively for profit and not caring about the lives of the people who are impacted by that. Yeah, I mean, I was also really surprised to learn about the casino dealings and the money laundering and stuff like that. Also, that the certain uh, practices that are illegal in mainland China that are not illegal here, and so people finding different workarounds and ways to bring that money over. Just really, really fascinating stuff. It even touches on the fentanyl and opioid addiction that Vancouver suffers from, and yeah, Vancouver is such a beautiful place. I try to go there once a year. It's one of my favorite places, but it is absolutely affected by homelessness and addiction and people just being priced out of the housing market across the board. And it's similar here in Toronto, but um, not to the extent I think that Vancouver is at, and their situation is different. So it was really, really informative to learn about everything from different perspectives, and I thought that they did a great job with this documentary. It was really engaging to
It was
watch.
a really interesting piece for myself to watch. I'm originally from Toronto, so I always had this mindset of, oh, Vancouver's just super expensive, and that was everyone's mindset here. And then I did move to Vancouver for 2 years, and so it was interesting to kind of see how the housing situation was kind of broken down from that, and like to really get a clearer understanding of why everything was as expensive as it is. And at first, I was kind of hesitant with the documentary because I was like, how is it going to be an hour and 20 minutes about housing and money and all that? But then it took such an interesting turn, and it had so many different areas to it and so many different points that it kind of connected in a sense where I'm just like, oh, I didn't know it became a race thing. And then it kind of became this money laundering thing about casinos and all that. So it was just super fascinating how it kind of became this like crime story, and how that affected the general idea of the housing in Vancouver. So that was just really fascinating to kind of listen into and to really see the perspective of so many different people who have studied this and who um, make it their life's work to really understand why things are happening the way they are. So yeah, it was just interesting to see and so fascinating to like listen to and to learn so much about it. It was super informative on so many different levels. And then also it was just really cool to kind of see areas of Vancouver again. But yeah, it was just kind of crazy to be like, oh, I'm talking about Chinatown and remembering a time when I was walking through Chinatown and kind of becoming scared of being there because I was just like, this is all just homelessness and just the ruins of what used to be a thriving and living area. So again, just fascinating to really witness and to understand from a different area now. So overall, really, really great job with putting everything
This
together.
is totally interesting. I learned a lot. They use different testimonials of how this housing industry in this particular city in Canada has suffered, and the access to a house in that city has gotten so bad, and all the affected people and the involved people, including the criminal schemes that they have figured out so far. They show some investigative research on the history plans for that city, how it has changed through time. They touch on gentrification and zoning. They speak also about the role of Expo 86 and the influx of Asian capital and how the population changed in that region of Canada. They also touch on brain drain and how it is affecting the job market and the capacity or ability for employers to search and maintain good qualified candidates. They also speak about how the house ownership is not a transparent process, and locals are suspicious of what the government and real estate agents and developers and other economic players are having in this how foreign investors and interests are affecting the locals' ability to buy a house or keep a house. They touch on some very interesting facts about crime and money laundering, how the Canadian police and drug investigations have found out money transactions, money smuggling, fake invoicing, and other underground banks, all leading to how the government is trying to implement some drug tax strategies to hopefully make this, if not disappear, at least decrease so people can get a dignifying home. Um, Along with some other local problems of drug use and abuse and homelessness. So this is so far very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I will look much more into this topic, and I am so glad I had the opportunity to watch
I
it.
really enjoyed this documentary. I found it to be very educational, very riveting, and also very frightening, too, especially when we're talking about how our elderly are going to be homeless. That with the housing market the way that it is in Vancouver, British Columbia, that the elderly are being forced out of Vancouver to try to find some place that's going to end up being cheaper to live. They have to leave their friends, they're leaving their homes, and also for young professionals too, who can't afford to get a foothold in the housing development to have their own home because they won't be able to make the mortgage payments on what they are because there isn't a living wage in Vancouver. That was really, really interesting. And I found all the information about the criminal activity that was going on with the housing market and the casinos and the money laundering and the drug deals. That was just riveting. I had no idea what all of that was about. I had no idea what smurfing was until I watched this. So now I'm in the know about what that means. I thought that it was beautifully shot. I really did. It was just absolutely stunning. A lot of the exterior shots, everyone who was speaking in the documentary, the people who were being interviewed, I found them to be very, very interesting. And I wanted to see more of that. I also thought that whoever edited this did an amazing job in making it seamless. The edits, how it flowed together with, if you want to call it a story, but it's not quite a story, the interviews and the information that was being given, it all flowed so beautifully that you never felt disjointed. You never felt like, wait, what are we talking about now? Everything flowed so nicely. So yeah, I really enjoyed this a lot.
As a millennial, I'll just go out ahead and say it. As a millennial, this film can be a major source of anxiety. It definitely should have come with a trigger warning for us. The part about how 6 people all had to live in a 1-bedroom unit, which costs about $1,600 a month on average to live in, just to make ends meet, made me wince. And as a Torontonian, I couldn't help but keep drawing parallels between the two cities. For one, I definitely shared a lot of the concerns they kept portraying from young people who have been priced out of the place that they grew up in. Also, both of our Chinatowns have become these dangerous neighborhoods that need to be cleaned up as a result of the luxury units that have been built in the surrounding areas. And even the section on the homeless population struck a nerve after those videos came out recently of the police clearing out encampments in Trinity Bellwoods. That's why the line about how there were very few resources dedicated to shutting down the money laundering scandal as opposed to cracking down on the homeless population was particularly disheartening. Now, this film touches on a lot of different topics related to Vancouver's real estate, though I would say that's where the film suffers the most, from being too overstuffed. I wish they could have spent more time talking about the homeless that has come about from these huge housing costs, because you could dedicate an entire film to that alone. That said, a large focus of this film was on Vancouver's Chinese population and how it's grown exponentially since China regained sovereignty of Hong Kong. And so as a result, my favorite interview subjects were, one of them was Beverly Ho, the Chinatown activist, because for as much as this film exposes the seedy underbelly of Chinese organized crime, which has absolutely played a part in the money laundering scandal and of rising housing prices, it also shines an empathetic light on the way that Chinatown has deteriorated and Beverly's fight to keep the culture of it alive. I also enjoyed hearing from Ian Young, the SCMP journalist, who brought a very unique take to China's history and relationship with Vancouver, all while speaking in a weirdly hypnotic Australian accent. But overall, this film does a great job of shining a light on an important issue, and I believe this should be a must-watch film for all Canadians.
What a well-constructed and thought-provoking documentary. It really exposed all the different angles of of a complex issue that housing is here in Canada. And I thought it really did a good job of dissecting the subject and presenting all the different angles and different areas that influence the problem that we have with housing here. It's not simple and it won't be easy to solve, but I came out of it feeling that I knew more about how it could be solved and how, if we just all work together, and our government people had were more motivated to fix it, that we could turn this ship around. So yeah, it was also, I thought the images were well selected. I really liked the graphics that gave more in-depth information in between the different sections. And I found it also entertaining, which is important. If you want to educate, then you need people to pay attention and want to keep watching your film. And so I thought that it was well constructed rhythmically, and it had a very informative contribution by different people, and the way that it was put together and presented visually and with the soundtrack, which was quite nice also. It kept me interested and entertained at the same time as I felt that I was learning a lot. So very well done. Yeah, the thought behind it was well investigated and well thought out, and it was really well mapped out, and the execution was great.